My wife's friend's actions that ruined my marriage. It was my fault. Let me be clear. I realize it was all my fault. Whatever the problems in my marriage, the cheating was my fault. I should have done so many things. I should have talked to Mary about the alienation, disrespect, or neglect I felt, but I never did. I felt my inadequacy when she stopped participating in our sexual relationship. No, she never turned me down, but just laid back no matter what I did. Obviously, I couldn't turn her on. I'd been able to do it before. I tried to improve our game, tried to get her to do different things, but no. When we were done making love, she'd give me a quick smack, clean up, and go to bed. I either hated myself for wanting a wife who clearly didn't want me, or I just smoldered in growing resentment. And more often than not, it was both. Finally, when the opportunity for sexual relations presented itself, I didn't think twice, just once. Sure, in hindsight, it's easy to say I should have talked to Maria, but how do you approach a cold, embittered fool who attacks before you've even had a chance to utter the first word? It's hard. When we first got married, Maria was fun, sexy, and a pleasure to be around. I enjoyed any time spent with her, even the things I hated, like shopping or doing laundry. I helped with everything just to be in her presence, and she loved me so much. It came from her very being. I was the happiest man in the world, and that's before you even consider our compatibility in the bedroom. We had been married 5 years and had just bought a modest 2-bedroom, 1-bath home in a modest neighborhood. All the houses were built after World War II with 1-car garages and small front and back yards. But this was ours. We were on the road, homeowners who were finally planning to start a family of our own. I should explain that Maria and I grew up in the worst neighborhoods in Albuquerque. Our neighborhood had gangs, crime, drugs, abandonment, and little else. Maria and I were blessed with friendly families whose religious values and faith in education allowed us to avoid the pitfalls around us. Attending Catholic schools kept us from the worst pressures and set us on the path to university and higher education. After receiving our degrees, we both became teachers in the Phoenix school systems. Marriage and a new home 5 years later set us on the path to eternal happiness. Or so I thought. The worm in the apple turned out to be Maria's friend, Gloria. Gloria barely made it through our parochial grammar school, but broke the rules in high school. When she was a sophomore, her uniform skirts were always above her hips, and she had no respect for any authority figures in the school. She didn't make it to the end of the year. That year and the next 2, she finished in public school. She soon had several homemade tattoos and an overtly sexual appearance, as well as a succession of high school boyfriends, and some older than high school age, who were either gang or crime-related, or maybe both. But Maria loved Gloria and remained her friend no matter what. Her parents did everything they could to keep these girls apart, so their communication was limited. Maria never allowed herself to sin with her friend, but still met up with her to have coffee or go to the movies. For some reason, Maria admired Gloria's independence and what Maria considered her freedom. Gloria often came to visit us when we were at university, and often came to spend time with Maria in our apartment, and now house, after our marriage. I tried to object, but it led to the only arguments I had with my wife at the time. I thought Gloria was a cheater. By the time she was 25, she had been married twice and divorced. I once joked that Gloria's bed had no posts because she had made a notch for each of her lovers, and all 4 posts were completely gone. Maria didn't notice Gloria's shortcomings, and because of my joke, she kicked me out of our bedroom for 2 days. Her first husband was a punk, a gang member whose job was to keep an eye on the dealers. He was constantly hanging all over Gloria, nonchalantly and openly massaging her breasts while talking to Maria and me. Gloria only smiled, as if proud of this display of her attraction to her husband. After the first time, I forbade them to stay at our house. The night he stayed with Gloria, he came out of the bedroom into the kitchen naked and pretended there was nothing unusual about it. And when he came over, I stopped him. Maria was embarrassed. But when Gloria laughed about it, Maria followed suit and chided me that it wasn't a big deal. At this, the punk turned to face us again, stuck out his bare pelvis, and said, "What do you mean it's no big deal?" It was a big deal, but I think I was the only one who blushed. Gloria and the punk found it amusing. Once again, Maria followed Gloria's lead. When her husband later started beating Gloria, she finally left him. She came to our house one night with a battered face, telling us what a monster her husband was. However, the little I was able to overhear of Maria tending to Gloria in the bathroom led me to believe that Gloria had been discovered. A year later, Gloria met and married Matt. I liked Matt. He was a nice guy, and why he got involved with Gloria is not clear to me. But he treated her well, removed her childhood tattoos, fixed her teeth, and taught her dress and manners. It was like he was her Henry Higgins. Surprisingly, Gloria turned out to be a capable student. She no longer swore and dropped all the ghetto Spanish vulgarities that littered her speech. She began to look almost elegant. The problem for me was that Gloria had somehow hooked up with this nice guy who was well-to-do, or very well off, as Matt put it. Suddenly, Gloria was off to Europe or the Caribbean on vacation or shopping. Matt pampered her, and of course she wanted to share those experiences with her best friend. I had my doubts, but not Maria. She flew off to Europe and Aruba, barely kissing me goodbye. She never cheated on me, so she told me, and I believed her then because she also told me how Gloria was constantly planting men on her and putting her in compromising situations. The cheater needed someone to play with, and Maria was her target. But when I tried to insist that my wife avoid this friend, I was quickly silenced. I'm sure Gloria led her to believe that I was just trying to control her and didn't trust her, because that's what she kept spouting at me. After those 2 big trips and a few weekends in New York and Los Angeles, they planned a tour of France and Italy that was going to take at least a month, possibly more, and required Maria to take a teaching leave. We could afford for her not to work, my job would cover the expenses, but our planned savings for a house would be severely delayed, as would our future family. Fortunately, in the midst of Maria and I having a heated argument about this trip, her screams were interrupted by the doorbell. When I opened the door, expecting the occupant of the neighboring apartment to ask us to be quiet, I was surprised to see a sullen Gloria carrying 2 large suitcases. She rushed past me into my wife's arms and sobbed. Matt kicked her out, not even wanting to hear why the pool boy was lying naked in their bedroom. Bad news? Gloria ended up staying with us for 3 weeks before she found a place of her own. Good news? At least the trip to Europe was canceled, and Gloria was getting enough from the divorce to afford her own place. When we finally bought our house, I was ecstatic, over the moon, and expected the same from Maria. She was happy and seemed content, but I was disappointed to hear her compare it to the beautiful home Gloria and Matt had. She had toured the house with Gloria the day before, and while she was as thrilled with the house as I was before, after the tour it was obvious that Gloria had hammered her with comments about how small the house was, how it didn't have a separate dining room, a 1-car garage, tiny rooms, and no second bathroom. I think this is what I viewed as Gloria's first step in destroying my marriage. She made my wife miserable in the best house we could afford and robbed me of the joy of home ownership. The acid was settling in my wife's soul. She was no longer my Maria, but became more and more sullen and grumpy. We hadn't lived in the new house more than 5 months, and barely had the ink dried on Gloria's divorce from Matt before Gloria picked up William with the polished countenance that Matt had labored to create for Gloria. If Matt was quite well off, William was just very funny. He'd never worked a day in his life, but he had large personal trust funds from both grandparents and was one of the beneficiaries of a giant family trust. I don't think he ever met anyone who wasn't a trust fund baby. Gloria impressed him with her street smarts and innate coolness. To the wealthy but naive William, it seemed that Gloria gave him license to have a street life. Be that as it may, she swept him off his feet, and they were married in Las Vegas before any of his family members even knew of the danger. Gloria's new Scottsdale estate, sports cars, limousines, designer clothes, country clubs, plural, and, of course, traveling had Gloria enthralled. For Maria, it was almost the opposite. Of course, she was happy for her friend, but she herself seemed to have lost what little was left in her life. The joy of life was completely gone from her life, and all that was left behind was a dried-up husk. Suddenly, everything we could afford wasn't good enough. Our house wasn't good enough. Her clothes weren't good enough. And I was afraid I wasn't good enough. That incident when she had a few drinks and voiced her jealousy was an oppressive awakening for me. All her life, Gloria has done whatever she wants, had sex with whoever she wants, and has all the money in the world. She took a sip of her drink. I've always been a do-gooder, did well in school, did everything right, married a nice guy, and now I can't even afford a car I can trust to start every morning. She looked at me drunkenly. What kind of nonsense is that, eh? So there I was with a wife who found faults in everything that went on in her life, who clearly thought I was inferior and had started making disparaging comments about me to our friends and family. Why? Because I wasn't very wealthy. And as a teacher, a public school teacher, it was unlikely I would ever be rich. Which Gloria was happy to point out, loudly and often. Is it any wonder that as we drifted apart, the stroking of my ego by the pretty substitute teacher at school was so compelling? My self-esteem took a major hit, and being stroked by a beautiful Nordic blonde, the exact opposite of my swarthy, petite Hispanic wife, was simply irresistible. The fact that my wife had been rejecting my love advances for weeks, or just lying still while I was having an affair with her, did nothing to help me resist. Of course, I immediately regretted it. The guilt was overwhelming. I wanted to quit immediately, so it only took a couple months before my brain finally overcame my libido and I ended the affair. My point is that the sex was great. Greta, the switch, was a real freak. I think she could match Gloria. We tried everything. We did everything. She even had friends who wanted to join. How could you say no to something like that? I guess I do deserve credit for stopping it somehow. But there's an old axiom. Don't eat where you shit, especially if you and your wife work at the same school. Turns out Greta liked to talk about her love exploits. She never talked to my wife, and our liaisons usually happened while Maria was visiting Gloria, but of course the gossip didn't immediately reach my wife. Worse yet, when we weren't having sex, I was blowing the whistle on any problems I was having with my wife. About what she didn't want to do, about how I didn't need to find out because Maria had become the corpse's primary bride, and about how Greta was so much better than Maria in bed. So much better, you wouldn't believe how much. Yes, I know. Ever since then, I've spent hours repeating in my head, stupid, 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 stupid. So it will come as no surprise to anyone that I came home to a furious woman, angry in the way that only a hot Latina woman can be. I don't know what was worse, my cheating or my fairly accurate descriptions of my wife's presence in the bedroom, probably the latter because my disrespectful comments seemed to begin to include things I never seemed to say. But after yelling at me about everything she'd been told and telling me what a lowlife I was, Maria sat down and forced herself to calm down. If I tried to speak, she would glare at me and raise her palm. Until her breathing slowed to normal and her rage became controlled, we sat facing each other. Then Maria began. Do you want to save this marriage? You know I do, I insisted. I love you. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. So sorry. My eyes glistened with shame. She patted the pillows on either side of her nervously. Okay, but you hurt me. I can't ignore that. We can't forget about it, please. I'll do anything. I swear I'll be the best. I blanched, but before I could finish, she continued. Okay, but I'll get even. Gloria says it's the only way. Gloria, I shouted. What does that cheating bitch know about saving a marriage? Okay, Maria repeated calmly. You don't want to save our marriage, so I'm leaving. No, I'm really sorry. I'll do anything, I pleaded. Well, then, Maria smiled sneakily at me. I'm having guests over tonight, and you're going to sit quietly in the bedroom and watch. What? Sighed I. I said quietly, you say anything else and it'll be over. I'll get my pound of joy, and you'll feel how humiliated I've been. She smiled her wicked smile again. And when Gloria and I decide you've been humiliated enough, we'll put all this behind us. What could I do? I didn't know what she was planning, but if Gloria was involved, nothing good could come of it. When the doorbell rang, Maria, before I could answer, told me to take the kitchen chair into the bedroom and sit silently in the corner. No matter what happens, you will not say a single word. Understand? She poked her finger at me until I nodded. I grabbed a chair and sat down in the bedroom. I heard her open the door and heard several male voices and, of course, her friends' laughter. They entered the bedroom, led by Maria and Gloria. 4 young men in their early 20s, all in good physical shape. They all looked at me with a grin. Come on, boys. Let's get undressed and get down to business, my wife ordered as she and Gloria began to shed their clothes. Looking at me, Maria added, I've heard how my husband likes multiple partners and how he thinks I need to expand my horizons, so come on. With those words, she and Gloria filled the time waiting for the men to undress. As the boys began to climb onto the bed, at first they clumsily sorted out who was doing what. Next, my wife and her friend began to take turns having sex with the men. This went on for a long time. At this point, I couldn't watch anymore. I didn't leave, but covered my eyes with my hands and stared at the floor, wondering who the cheater in bed was. It certainly wasn't my Maria. She seemed to be completely erased from my memory. I knew I was being hypocritical because I was essentially doing the same thing with Greta and her friends, but I didn't recognize Maria anymore. I wondered what else could be salvaged. When Maria came up for air, she saw me with her eyes covered. She screamed in rage, Asshole! You look! You witch! You wanted a wife more experimental, more open in bed. Now you got it! Look! I watched, but it was already over. With a chuckle, See you later, asshole! All 4 of them got dressed and left. When it was over, both women sat on the bed. Gloria whispered in Maria's ear, and my wife looked at me, clearly unhappy with the events of the evening. Are we done with this show? I asked. Can we put it behind us? No, asshole. You're supposed to be watching, not covering your eyes like some girl. No, we're not done. You better try harder next time, said Maria through gritted teeth clenched with anger. No, I said. I'm done. If you want this marriage, you're done with it. Maria sat looking at me for a moment, then said quietly, No, we're not done. If we are, we're getting a divorce. Gloria laughed and said, And I'm going to let everyone, all your family and friends, know that you're a cheater. I'll tell them that we found a baby video on your computer, and I can find something to put on it. Maybe I already put something on your computer. Maybe it's there now, or maybe I erased it. But the computer guy will still find it. She laughed. Maria joined her, shaking her head. When you get out of jail, you'll never be able to teach. Yeah, you'll be lucky if you work at a car wash. Won't your parents be so proud? My mind shut down. Who is this fool? She, impersonating Gloria. I couldn't figure out what to do next. The end. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.